I'm very interested in this bit here, because you're alluding to one of the common conversations you and I have had now for about 6 or 7 years. And I want to pause you there, really. And one of the challenges, if you want to be a recovery group and you want to be independent, is this concept that you and I have juggled with all the time, which is about the notion of the king's shilling. Where does your money come from, and what do they want from you? And I know that you and I have had so many conversations about, God, I don't want these people's money anymore, or, so I'm very interested in your ideas on some of that stuff about how that affects the way recovery groups do and don't behave.
Yeah. I think when I first got involved, I mean, I think that suspicion, I think it's the only way you can kind of call it, because there's a price to everything in life. But I think one of the things that I'd seen very, very early on within treatment services, there was a lot of tokenism. There was a lot of, you had a couple of guys who get wheeled out for this event and get wheeled out for that event. Do you know what I mean? And it was just like, so I kind of said at the start when we first looked at Agro, let's try and do this. Let's only seek funding if we need funding. If there's something to fund, you know what I mean? Let's actually try and establish terms of reference first, and what we're trying to actually do, and what we're trying to build, and what we're trying to develop. But I think at that point, because it's quite a political sort of thing to get recovery, and there was a lot of willingness at that point, ironically, to fund recovery. So I think kind of almost we got pushed into funding and a coordinator and all this sort of stuff, and it never really sat very well with me, but it was what it was, and kind of, but when we looked at specifically for this, I mean, again, that was probably why I first kind of, I'll be honest with you, Wulf, why I first approached yourself and Katie were probably two of the very early conversations I had once I decided to go it alone and to set up on my own at that point, as I was to have conversations with you. And that was why I deliberately sought funding outside of the substance use field, because I was fearful that we'd be deliberately undermined by previous employers, where particularly there was a lot of employment tribunal issues and stuff still going on, and I had zero trust and zero faith in the commissioning arena within North Wales, even though there's some good people involved, but particularly in terms of interagency stuff. I've sat in meetings where we talked about trying to, particularly through Agro, trying to almost create like a recovery group that would have dovetailed perfectly with criminal justice, where we basically would have been able to work with, even with sort of Schedule 1 sex offenders, high risk arsonists and stuff. We could have done all this stuff there. And I can remember having a conversation with the chief exec at the time. He just went, "There's no money for this." And I said, "Well, what happens if we go for the money and we find the money?" He said, "If you get the money, your competition at that point, all bets are off."